being an entrepreneur sounds cool, but the reality of building a business is very, very difficult. Every level that you hit, there's a lot of things that suck that you just won't want to do. What you're capable of is on the other side. I don't feel like it.
And if you're committed to what it is that you're trying to do, nothing is going to stop you from getting there.
Welcome back to another episode of Real Business Owners with myself, Trevor Cowley. Hope you guys are doing well. I really, really do. There's been a theme of conversations that I've had with business owners over the last, several months with, a lot of people struggling. Usually people don't reach out to me to help celebrate their wins. Usually they're reaching out to me when there's issues or problems. And I wanted to go over a call that I had with an individual because I think it's important. And I think that his situation is the common situation for the majority of business owners. And so I think that there's going to be value to unpack in the conversation that we had. And I want to share that with you guys because, I spent 55 minutes with him. We unpacked some things, the problems that he was facing, and understood where he was trying to get, and then created a plan of action. In other words, created clarity on the next steps, the things that he needs to do in order to be able to make those things happen. And so, he was talking and saying, yeah, well, this is what I want. I want to make X amount, and, how do I get off the tools? And, I keep going back out there. I just lost one person. I still have 5 people, and I said, let's just be real. It's fucking easy for you to go get on the tools. You've done it for so long. You don't even have to think. It's all happening subconsciously because you've done it for so many years that it's easy to do to stay busy. But the reality is his business, for instance, let's say, is a bucket. He has this bucket and he's trying to fill this bucket up with water to get to the point where it has the ability to overflow. In other words, a result that is abundant, right? I think that that's what we all want. And the issue with the majority of people's bucket, in other words, the majority of people's businesses, is there's a bunch of holes in the bottom of the bucket. So they stay busy doing the things that they know how to do that comes easy to them. And that's them putting water in the bucket. But the water that they're putting in the bucket is going out the bottom based upon the holes that they have in their business. And they don't even understand exactly where all the money's going. I asked what he made on an annual basis, looked up some information in his industry on what the billable hours should be for his workers versus what he's actually earning. And his earnings are like 50% what they should be. I'm like, dude, if you're making, 120 to 150 grand a year based upon the business that you have with the amount of employees that you have, you should be making an easy $250,000 per year. And that's you not being on the tools, not having to do the work. So I said, there's holes here, and it's up to us to identify these holes and then create a plan of action in order to plug these holes so that you can get the result that you say that you want. But right now your actions are speaking louder than your words. You say that you want this result, but yet you're not doing anything in order to make progress for that result to even be a possibility. And so on this call, we identified one. I said, well, on average, how much do you make per employee? Because these people go out, they do work, and there's billable hours per their work, and they make X amount of money. And in his situation, his billable hours are $135 an hour, and he has employees that are getting paid $40 an hour to go do the work. He obviously has to supply trucks. There's insurance, there's rent, there's marketing. There's going to be admin stuff. There's additional things. We would have to double the sales team, and we would have to double our marketing spend. Obviously, fulfillment would have to be beefed up a little bit as well, but I don't think fulfillment would completely double. Why? Because somebody's answering the phones. Rent's not going to necessarily double because we have the space. So it's like the more that you grow, if you're doing it properly, the more profitable you become because there's already certain expenses that you're taking on that are going to be there regardless of whether you're doing $2 million or whether you're doing $4 million a year, right? And so what I broke down to him is what we need to do is we need to create a spreadsheet. And you need to have your admin person. And he also had some cash flow issues. I'm like, that's the last issue that you should have with the business that you're in, and the amount of money that you're making is way less than what it should be. So you shouldn't be having cash flow issues. There's a problem. There's a hole. There's something that's missing here. And when I start going in and asking certain questions, it becomes very apparent that most business owners are out there just focusing on what they need to do that day in order to survive. It's the same thing. I'm going to stay busy, filling the bucket up with water, but I'm not going to get busy on addressing the holes so that the bucket has the ability to overflow with abundance. We identified what the issue was. The issue was he didn't understand his numbers. If there's employees on his payroll and some of them are getting 30 billable hours per week, but they're getting paid 40, which is fine. There's going to be time, in between jobs and things like that they're not going to get a full 40 billable hours in a 40-hour work week because they're going to go from job to job. They might have to pick up supplies or whatever it is, right? But we need to come up with a number that actually makes sense where there's margins there. So we did the 135 an hour times 30 hours. It's a little over $4,000 per week, and he's paying him $2,000 a week. But I'm like, okay, now let's subtract all of your payroll. Let's subtract those individuals that actually have billable hours, and let's find out what your raw number is. What you have to generate per person in order to just break even as a business. So if you're paying them $8,000 a month, but then there's trucks and insurance and there's rent and there's marketing and there's admin, you're going to take the rent, marketing, admin, trucks, insurance, and you're going to look at what that expense is every single month. Okay. Then you're going to divide it by how many employees you have. If you have 5 employees and it's $20,000 a month, that's $4,000. So technically, in order for you to put that person in the truck, in order for them to be able to get the $135 per hour on their billable hours, it's actually, in order for you to break even, they need to bring in at least $12,000 per month. Right now, if they're bringing in $4,000 per week at 30 hours a week at $135 per hour in terms of their billable hours, that's $4,100, $4,200, something like that, right? Now you times that by 4, you're talking about $16,500, somewhere right around that number. If your overhead is $12,000, now you should be profiting roughly $4,000 per person. If you have 5 people, that's $20,000 per month. That's $240,000 per year. He's not doing that right now. And I was being conservative with the numbers in terms of the billable hours. He's got a cash flow problem. I said, okay, how much in outstanding invoices do we have? It's $130,000. So then we had to button that up. If any of you guys are out there doing work in carrying the note, so to speak, in other words, you're buying all the materials, but you're not getting a deposit down for those materials, you're basically like acting as a bank. You're loaning somebody money in order to be able to do the job that they want you to do. And then you get paid net 30, net 60, whatever it is. When in reality, the majority of people that are doing it the right way are getting a deposit. They're getting a 50% deposit so that it covers some labor and the majority of their materials. Then they can bill the rest after. In other words, where it covers the rest in terms of the billable hours that their employees worked, and then the rest is margin. In his situation, in the industry and the business that he's in, I simply told him, why are you out there chasing invoices? If any of you guys are out there waiting to get paid, there's better ways to do it. You have the ability, when you schedule an appointment, this is more so blue collar type stuff. If you schedule an appointment and you're out to do a service or work on a job, before you even step foot on the job, your admin person should be reaching out, scheduling that appointment on when the tech or your employee is going to be out there, and they should be getting a payment on file, just getting a card on file. Hey, Bob, it's Trevor here with ABC Construction. We're going to be out there on Thursday. I'm just making sure that that's a good time. Yeah, that's a good time. Okay, is there a specific card that you want to go ahead and put on file? We do require a card on file prior to starting the job. 9 times out of 10, nobody's going to have a problem with it. If they, you are the leader, you are the one controlling and dictating how you operate your business. And the majority of people operate their business in a manner in which is, Well, what are they going to think about it? If I ask for this or that, well, what if they don't like it? You're the one that's running the business. You have your systems, you have your processes. If somebody chose to work with you, they're going to choose to utilize the systems and processes that you have with inside of your organization. We button that up because 70 to 80% will bill through immediately when the job's done. Now, if he had an additional 70 to 80% right now in his bank account of $130,000, you're talking about 80, 90, $95,000 that he would have, and he'd probably only have about 30,000 if it's something declined or whatever it is. That's when you have somebody start chasing people down in order to get payment on those invoices. Always collect some sort of payment, either upfront or card on file prior to even starting the job. So at the end of the job, all you need to do is just get a quick signature that everything's up to par, that they were there, they did a good job. And then your admin team gets the notification that the job was complete and they're able to bill that card on file. Then what that person needs to do is they go to the spreadsheet and say, okay, Bob serviced this job and this was the billable hours on that job. And each month you could take a look at that individual's billable hours versus what the overhead is. Like I said, $8,000 over here for their overhead for just their payroll, plus all the additional expenses required to support that person so that they have the ability to even do the job, like the admin person, like the rent, like the trucks, like the insurance, and you divide it up by how many employees you have, and you'll know an actual number of what you need to hit every month just to break even. And then I told them, I said, well, why don't you do this? Anything above $20,000 per month that they have billable hours for, then you could do a 50-50 split because you already know that you're more than profitable. Again, it doesn't have to be 20,000. It could be less than that. It could be 18,000. It could be 15, whatever number that you want. But the idea is, how do you create opportunities for people with inside of your organization? How do you create a sense of urgency? How do you incentivize them to show up in a manner in which is productive for the business to be profitable? I'm a big believer when you're in these service type industries and you have billable hours and that's how you actually make your money, that the employees that are doing the work should be incentivized and you should be tracking everything that they're doing. In other words, the revenue that they're bringing in for the business and what it costs to be able to support that individual and pay that individual to actually go do the work. And then every single month you tally the billable hours versus what the overhead is in order for them to get paid and to support the business so that they have the support that they need in order to even do the job. Then you're going to have the billable hours go right up against that. Okay, we billed $15,000 this month, $12,000. We profited $3,000 off Bob. Well, on average, we should be profiting at least $5,000 or $10,000 or $15,000 per month per person doing this type of work. Then you could take a look and see where the hole is. You can't identify a hole in a business unless you have your numbers. Your entire business revolves around numbers. It was just yesterday, just so that you guys know, a heads up announcement, whatever you want to call it. For the last year, I've been in the process of trying to be bought out of Easier Accounting. I was looking for a chunk of money and saying, peace out. I have different business ventures that make me money anyways. I have money in the bank. Everything I have is paid off. I'm trying to simplify my life to the point where it's like, okay, let's get maybe less irons in the fire rather than adding more irons in the fire. And let's liquidate maybe some equity that I have in different businesses. And over the last year, there's been 3 different people that have been interested in purchasing the business, or 3 different groups of people. And each one of those fell through. There was one that put a $20,000 non-refundable deposit down. And they still ended up backing out, so when you're selling stuff, always do a non-refundable deposit to show a level of commitment that they have to actually follow through and get the deal done, right? Otherwise, it's just, you're flirting and you're not going home with the person, so to speak, if you know what I mean. So it's just all hot air. It's, speculation. And so nothing came about in regards to these 3 different potential suitors, let's say, to buy my equity. Whether they couldn't get the money or couldn't get a loan or whatever it was. I mean, there was just different circumstances with each one of it. each one of them. So just yesterday I sat down in the office, and we're going to be buying out a business partner. But how do you know how much to buy them out for if you don't know your numbers? You don't know what you're profiting. You don't know what your overhead is. You don't know how many leads are coming in, what you're spending on the leads. All of those things matter to a business. And it was the same thing here with the guy that I was on the phone with. I'm like, bro, you're not fucking running a business. You're staying on the tools just so that you could survive, just so that and you're still having cash flow issues, and you should be making double what you're making, and you shouldn't even be on the tools. How did this happen? It only happened because he had no idea. He couldn't answer any of my questions in regards to when I was asking for data, real information, so that we could create a plan. And then it became blatantly obvious that the plan needs to be, let's get data so that we can make better business decisions, and we understand who's bringing in the revenue, who's not bringing in the revenue. There could be one or two people that only have 15 or 20 billable hours per week, and 100% of your margins going out the window because you're paying them 40 hours a week. If they're only getting 20 billable hours and you're paying them 40 hours a week, you're really paying them $80 an hour to actually do the work. And that doesn't make sense when you're charging $135 an hour, plus you have those additional expenses. Now you have a break-even business, when in reality, you need to have a set number that each one of those employees do on a week-to-week basis to make sure that these numbers add up to where they need to be. So yesterday, we're sitting in the office, we're talking numbers. I throw out a number. It's not quite what he wanted, and it, never is when you're negotiating stuff like that, which is fine. They have a number in mind, you have a number in mind, and the idea is, well, how do we make it work? Both parties have to, give a little bit and concede on, their stance or their perspective in order to do something like this, where you're buying equity and buying businesses or whatever it is, right? But I walked immediately into our controller's office and I said, this is the data that I need. Give me our complete overhead, remove these certain expenses, and then divide it by 8, because we're 8 months into the year. That's going to give me our running monthly overhead on average, because obviously overhead has variations depending on sales commissions and, lead expense. If you're spending 25 grand a month on Facebook ads, or if you're spending 8 grand a month, like every month would vary depending on certain seasons in the accounting world. Quarter 4 is really good for us. Quarter 1's good for us because tax season's coming up. Summertime gets a little bit slower in terms of marketing. So that's when you want to bring it down a little bit. So there's going to be variations. And so the idea was, I just want to know what the average is on a month to month basis. And then tell me what we're billing on a residual on average, and for which services we're billing that for. Is it for bookkeeping? Is it for advisory services? Is it for tax preparation? Is it for payroll? There's these various different categories that each one of these streams of income have the ability to fall in. And each one of those have variation in terms of risk, right? So advisory services is probably not going to be one where you're going to have an advisory client for 10 years. You may advise them for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is. But once you get all the tax strategies down and everything's kind of in sync and in place, you're probably not going to have that advisory client that much longer. Bookkeeping, it can last forever, right? Tax preparation can last forever, right? Payroll could last forever. There's just certain categories that have certain, a lifespan to each one of these categories, right? Like the lifetime value, LTV is what they call it in the business world, per customer. And so I was able to go into the controller's office and get that information within 10 minutes, then go back into the meeting, into our conference room, and say, here's the data. This is the number that you want. This is the number that we want. Based upon these numbers, this is what we can actually do right now. And then we could work certain things out as time goes on if we want to, right? So we talked about a bunch of different situations and scenarios. And this is where, getting creative is a benefit, right? To where how can we get as close to his number as possible, but without risking what we're trying to accomplish in shelling out money and making it a profitable deal for the individuals that are still within the business. And so I was able to get raw data like that. And I was on a phone call with somebody asking various different questions. I'm like, okay, well, you're telling me that you want X result, that you want to get off the tools, that you want to be a real business owner. You don't want to just be self-employed and have to work like you're working just to make 120 grand a year for the rest of your life, right? Yeah. And I said, well, your actions are saying something completely different. They're speaking so loud that I can't even hear the words. Most of you out there running a business, you're not really running a business. You have a business so that you could pick up a paycheck, but you're hoping magically one day that business has the ability to set you free, to create financial freedom. But you keep defaulting to the things that are the easy thing for you to do, like getting back on the tools. Because as long as you stay busy, that's a distraction from the real work that has to be done in order for you to make progress. You have to master the mundane. You have to master the boring. If you cannot do the things that you're not wanting to do, or the unfun, the unsexy stuff that business requires, you're not building an actual business. Whether you know how to do it or not, it does not matter. In his situation, he needed somebody in that admin position. A lot of people have somebody that they know, like a spouse, a parent, a child, a friend, doing some things on the side. But I'm like, if you really want to run a business, you have to dial in these things. And in order to dial in these things, you need to prioritize it. In other words, that has to be somebody's full-time job. That's where all their attention goes. There's a rule that we have in business. Prioritize the money. So if somebody's willing to give you money, that needs to move up the priority list. A business lives and dies based upon the cash flow, based upon the amount of money that you have. There's a billion incredible ideas and a billion incredible businesses that have came and gone, and they're out of business now, not based upon the fact that it was a bad business. It was a bad business owner. They weren't doing the necessary in order to make it a real actual business. We had Alistair on the podcast not that long ago, and I don't remember if we touched on it, but he talked about a half cycle business and a full cycle business to our business mastermind on our meetup, not last meetup, the meetup before that we had earlier this year. And what that means is a half cycle business is a business that hasn't seen a full cycle. What that means is you haven't been through a recession yet. So if you've been in business for less than 15 years, you're a half cycle business. If you've been in business for over 20 years, you're a full cycle business, meaning you've seen the good economy and you've also seen a bad economy. That's a full cycle, because business and economies, they have cycles. There's going to be, 10 to 12 to 15 year good, and then there's going to be a downturn. The question is can you survive the downturn, a full cycle? And if you're dealing with cash flow issues right now, when we're not necessarily even in a downturn, what's going to happen when you're in a downturn? You're not going to have the data that you need in order to make the proper business decisions. Look, now we're only at 15 billable hours per person. So we actually have to let one or two people go so that we're getting the proper number in terms of billable hours per person, so that we remain profitable and we can remain a full cycle business and not have this cycle that we're currently in take us out. Data is absolutely everything. Numbers don't lie. It tells the truth. The problem is most people aren't prioritizing data, and they're not prioritizing their numbers and understanding absolutely everything there is to understand about their business. I should be able to say how much each month goes out for your trucks. You should spit a number out. What's your insurance cost? How much money does each person on your payroll bring in terms of profit? These things should be easily answered by a business owner. And if you can't answer some of these questions, you got a problem on your hands. And if you're not the person to fix it because you are on the tools and that's just not your zone of genius, which is fine, there's people out there where that's their zone of genius. Scott Ramajone's higher VP. He's in Real Business Owners. He's in the inner circle. He's been a part of the high level mastermind for years as well. But it's not really that difficult to go out there and spend a couple grand a month and hire an admin, some sort of assistant that has the ability to be a spreadsheet wizard, a freak in the sheets, so to speak. Spreadsheets is what I'm talking about, to where they can do all this stuff for you, where all you're doing is looking at the data, and the data is going to make it painfully obvious where you are lacking or where you need to improve. But without any of that information, you're just flying by the seat of your pants. It's like hopping in a car as a passenger when the driver is blind. I talked about it today on our Inner Circle Zoom call. I'm like, it's like those little road bumps are you're driving down, you're like, oh, okay, I need to get up. Like you're waiting for these emergencies and these warnings to happen within inside of your business before you're taking things seriously. The fact is if you're getting by right now, you're probably not going to take some of this information very seriously. You're going to probably listen to this podcast. Oh yeah, that's cool. And go about your business and go about your life. If you want to build a real business is built off of data. It's built off of numbers. When somebody comes in and buys a business, the first thing that they do is they look at the numbers and they look at the data. When I first bought into business ownership with my partners, that's the first thing that I did. It says, I want to see the numbers. I want to see every expense. I want to know exactly what our overhead. I want to know where we're wasting money. And I started going down the list. I'm like, oh, this guy's taking 20% in terms of whatever we spend on marketing on our Google ads. And at that point, we were spending like $40,000-$50,000 a month. This guy was making $8,000 to $10,000 a month. I'm like, I already know I can get somebody to run Google ads for $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month. So I hit him up. Some of you guys maybe need to renegotiate things with vendors. If you've been with a vendor and you've been growing as a business and you're utilizing that vendor more and more and more, you need to be getting those discounts that the bigger vendors get. You need to renegotiate things. But the fact is most people won't do this stuff unless the pain becomes so great that they're like, oh, fuck, we might go out of business if we don't make some adjustments. But the reality is every business right now on planet Earth has the ability to make tweaks, has the ability to make an adjustment to make their business better, whether it's through customer experience, whether it's through accessing better data, whether it's, understanding how much people are actually working in terms of their billable hours versus what they're actually getting paid and the complete overhead that it takes in order for that person to be able to service those jobs. Whether it's a new system or a new process. I will tell you this, there's systems and processes that you'll build initially that are good enough to get you to a certain point, just like you are good enough to get you to a certain point in life. Then you're going to hit a ceiling. Those systems and processes aren't going to be good enough for the next level. Just like you, as you are right now, probably aren't good enough to get to the next level. That's why you should always be working on yourself. Here's why self-improvement is so important. Self-improvement is so important because you get what you tolerate. Okay. You as the version of you that you are today will tolerate so much bullshit. And then when the pain gets so great, then you'll take a look at some things and see what you could adjust, change, tweak, whatever. Self-improvement is important because as you improve, you tolerate less bullshit. So the things that you let kind of go under the bridge right now, as you're improving, your standard increases. And as your standard increases, you tolerate less bullshit. You don't got time for it. You operate in a certain way. If somebody comes to you with some bullshit, you're like, dude, I don't give a fuck. That's not true. You do have the ability to do that. You could do it by doing this, and this, because you're operating at a certain standard and you know what other people have the ability to operate at. So you tolerate less of the bullshit. You're tolerating something right now in your business that you shouldn't be tolerating. My guess is because the version of you right now isn't improving. You're not changing. You're not morphing. Self-improvement is the way to business growth. The fact is you will hit a ceiling and your business will no longer grow. It'll no longer improve. The problems that you currently have will be the problems that you have forever unless you take personal development seriously. If you're not developing yourself, you're not developing your business. I told them flat out. I'm like, bro, you're not running a business right now, dude. You're just taking on the next job and doing whatever you can to get through that job, to get to the next one, to get to the, and like you're literally flying blind right now. Here's the problem. He's having cash flow issues. The last thing that you want to do when you have cash flow issues is take on an additional expense. But is it an investment or is it an expense? Ask yourself that. If he paid some sort of virtual assistant to track all the billable hours, to do the scheduling, to get a card on file so that it can immediately be invoiced, first off, he wouldn't be having any cash flow issues right now. He wouldn't be worrying about payroll next week, which he is. So if any of this stuff sounds familiar, then that means that there's some adjustments that need to be made. But in order to make that adjustment, he's going to actually have to spend a little bit of money. And I said, let me ask you this. If you spent a couple grand a month on a virtual assistant that had the ability to get you all this data, all this information, to where you can see Steve over here only makes the company $3,000 a month, but Bob over here makes the company $10,000 a month. Why is that? They're both getting paid the exact same amount. The overhead on the business is the exact same amount. They're each costing you X in order to put in a truck and get them out to the job and do the actual work. So we need to change something here with Steve. We need to have a conversation with him. How do you even know that you need to have a conversation with Steve unless you had access to those numbers? So if Steve now was equal to Bob and bringing in $10,000 a month in profit instead of just $3,000, guess what? You just found another $7,000 a month. So is that $2,000 that you're going to spend to bring somebody in your organization to have the data in order to make these adjustments or have these conversations? Is that an investment or is that an expense? Is that a cost? To me, it looks like an investment. If based upon where you're at right now, I know you could do $250,000 a year in profit and you not have to be the one doing the work, but you're only making 120 or 130 and you're out there doing work, there's something wrong. And this individual will help you identify what's wrong with your business. Having access to these numbers and this data will help you make better business decisions so that you can get to that point where you are making $250,000 a year and you have your admin team and you have your fulfillment. You can now shake hands, kiss babies, do your pageant wave. In other words, you're doing the PR for your business. You're going out there, you're bidding the jobs, and you're creating more relationships so that you can keep the work coming. Then from there, all you need to do is continue to hire and expand on the people that have the ability to bring in revenue through those billable hours. Because the support staff or the admin side, that's already taken care of. That's already an expense that's occurred. So if you hire 2 more people, you're not going to have to hire 2 more admin people. So then by default, you now become even more profitable through scaling your business. I'm telling you all this stuff so that you have a way out at one point. Doing this stuff is your exit strategy. Doing this stuff is not fun. Doing this stuff is not going to make you cartwheel out of bed and get excited. There's a voice inside of everybody's head, and that voice is the other version of you. If I tell you right now to not speak it, but to say just in your mind, real business owners. In your mind right now, say real business owners. You heard yourself say that. Nobody externally heard you say it, but you heard yourself just say real business owners. So who actually said that? That's that voice inside your brain. That's the exact same voice that tells you not to do some of the things that you know that you should be doing. When you wake up when you're tired and it's like, just not today. You did good yesterday. You don't got to go to the gym. You don't got to eat healthy. You don't got to make that investment. You don't got to dig into your numbers. You don't need to have that conversation. Anytime that there's friction, that voice will pop up. That's who you're up against. That version of you that's inside of you, that's what's holding you back. This, to me, is why it's so important to not just design your business, but actually design your life and structure it in a manner to have certain habits and certain routines that are non-negotiable. Because when that voice kicks in, because you're experiencing friction, because you're tired, you're sore, you don't want to have that conversation, you need to create systems or processes and habits and routines that it's like, if I have a thought and I need to have a conversation with somebody, I need to set that appointment up right then and there. Whether it's through a text message, whether it's through, hey man, we need to chat. You have any time this week? You're holding yourself accountable by scheduling an appointment with that person. And when you finally sit down with them, you have no choice but to have that difficult conversation. People that have difficulty having tough conversations, that's the easiest way to do it, is schedule the conversation with somebody, because scheduling a conversation with somebody is easy. It's like, just kind of step one. And then going to that scheduled meeting is holding you accountable to have that difficult conversation. But back to that voice in your mind. That's your enemy. My guess is that voice doesn't, when you wake up, say, "Oh my God, it's such a good day. I can't wait to get out of bed. I can't wait to go to the gym. I can't wait to go to work. I can't wait to have a difficult conversation. I can't wait to make that risky investment." That voice pops up every single time that there's friction and talks you out of doing the things that you know you need to do. That's who you're up against. You are the enemy, but you also are the hero. You have free agency. In other words, the power of choice. You could choose when you wake up. You could choose when you go to sleep. You can choose whether you want to accept that job. You could choose who you hire. You could choose who you fire. You could choose to have difficult conversations. You could choose to run your business blindly. You could choose to have access to data. Everybody has access to choices. The quality of life that you have and the quality of business that you have is dependent on the quality of choices that you make. And then there's that voice that wants to sideline you because it doesn't want to expend extra energy. But the reality is all progress requires you to have an uptick in the energy expenditure department in order for you to make progress, or an uptick in the money that you have to shell out in order to make progress. We came to a number. I'm buying a business partner out, and the office that you see me in right now, if you watch this on Spotify or you watch it on YouTube, it's going to change over the next couple of weeks. I'm going back into the office and going to be pretty much running, stepping back in and whatever you want to, sitting on the throne again, so to speak, over there at Easier Accounting. For the most part, all the systems and the processes are all dialed in. The team is absolutely incredible over there. But there's some tweaks and some adjustments that need to be made to that business so that that number at the bottom is higher. And I already know the exact tweaks, the exact adjustments, everything that needs to be done for that business in order to see the number that I want on the bottom line every single month, so that I know exactly how much money I have the ability to make from that business every single month. I would not have been able to make this decision if I didn't have the data. I wouldn't understand that, yes, I can expend that much money and buy that person out. Yes, it's scary to go out there and shell out a bunch of money. But based upon the data that I have, I know it's a good decision, because if I remove this, and this, and, I own more of the business, this bottom number is now greater and I own a greater amount of it. How would we have been able to do that if we just sit there and go back and forth on, well, I want this. Well, I only want to give you this. Unless we have the information that has the ability to support their side and my side and find some common ground. I wish that business partner nothing but the best, but at the end of the day, there was friction there. And unfortunately, it didn't work out the way that we both had planned. But at the end of the day, you should make sure that it's a win-win situation anytime that you're negotiating with anybody. I get frustrated with people that I'm going to win this. I'm a great where you're really trying to beat down somebody else for your own personal gain. If it's a good deal, make sure that they walk out, getting paid close to what they want to get paid, or if not what they want to get paid. If you believe in what it is that you're trying to accomplish and you believe in what you're actually buying, what is it going to take an additional 6 months to be able to recoup that extra little bit of money that you gave? Let's think about a bigger picture. In 10 years, will it matter? No, it won't matter if we pay that little bit extra, or if we pay it all up front right now versus doing a payment. It's all going to be a wash 10 years from now. And it's not going to matter how we structured it. It's not going to matter if I paid a little bit more money. The data gave me the information in order to feel comfortable in a situation that is a difficult situation in regards to shelling out money to buy more of a business. Every situation that you have in your business revolves around data and revolves around numbers. Every single part of your business. How much does it cost to operate your business? How much does it cost to pay somebody to even do the fulfillment of your business? How much does it cost per lead? How many leads do you need in order to close one deal? All of that comes down to what? Numbers and data. And if you don't have access to this stuff and you're not taking it seriously, then you are just self-employed, and you're probably going to stay self-employed and hopefully remain at least self-employed if you're only a half cycle business when we hit another downturn, and you're supposed to, within those situations, become a full cycle business where you can survive the ups and the downs. But you'll never, ever be able to survive a downturn and become a full cycle business unless you have access to data, because as things are getting worse, you could see it happen like in real time versus waiting for 6 months or a year and being like, dude, we're in a fucking shitstorm right now. How the fuck did we get here? You weren't watching it. Started with you just breaking even, then losing $5,000 here, 10 grand here, 3 grand here. Oh, you made 10 grand. Then like you're looking at the bank account, like, well, I guess we have money. I'm still paying myself. Like, you're not running a business. You're just doing whatever you need to do to pick up a paycheck. The podcast is called Real Business Owners for a reason. I want you guys to be able to make that transition. It's not going to happen like overnight or quick. Nothing great happens quickly. You know, for people that have a great NBA career or NFL, I mean, you're talking 10 to 20 years in order for them to have a great career in a certain industry. It might take you 10 to 20 years to be able to build something that has the ability to do what it is that you want it to do. But it could take forever and potentially just never happen unless you're taking some of these things that we discussed on today's podcast seriously. I hope that was beneficial to you. I hope you take it serious. I hope you get access to the numbers, the data, the information that you need. So as a business owner, you can make the tough decisions a little bit easier of a decision, because you're like, man, every time I hire, a new technician, I can make an extra $50,000 a year, or an extra 30,000 or 40, whatever the number is. Now hiring isn't necessarily an expense anymore, and you're not concerned about it. You're looking at it as an investment that has the ability to make you money. So you're shifting your perspective by having access to this information. Now hiring is a good thing because you become more profitable. You're not going to be able to do these things without that information. Rate and review the podcast, please. I give all this information to you for absolutely free. If you're ready to level up, go to joinrbo.com. Let's get you in the inner circle. If you're interested in attending RBO Live and you heard it on this podcast, just send me a DM. I'll make sure that I take care of you, get you a spot reserved, get you a ticket. I'd love to see you in the room. Show you what the Real Business Owners community really truly looks like behind the scenes, in-person meetups where you have the ability to network. All you need is one new connection, one new piece of information, one shift in your perspective, and your entire life can be different. Much love to you. Hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Keep kicking ass.